The key term that I think about as we kind of close 2025 is resiliency.
Welcome back to the TroopHR Podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Bradley. In today's episode, we're joined by Principal Attorney for Manifest Law, Nicole Gunara. We're going to explore the immigration policy impact of 2025 and what that means it has in store for us for 2026. We covered everything from H-1B visas to birthright citizenship and how the Supreme Court decisions upcoming in 2026 could impact what we do as HR executives. We keep our discussion grounded in commentary on the policy and its implications on HR executives. But it's important to keep in mind that this is legal commentary and not legal advice. If you need to seek out legal advice, we encourage you to reach out to Nicole or your immigration counsel for further consultation. But before diving into 2026, we asked Nicole to look in the rearview mirror at 2025 and share with us some of the key immigration policy moments that occurred and how it impacted HR executives.
I don't know if we want to call it like a highlight, but I would say like some of the most dramatic moments of 2025. Yeah. I think a lot of us can talk about this 100K proclamation coming out the door on September 19th. I've heard so many stories, Taylor. You got HR people who are on a plane to Hawaii being like, do I cancel my Hawaii trip? You have on the opposite end of that particular spectrum, the foreign nationals trying to barge out of the planes, trying to deboard themselves to get back into the United States and not leave the country. I would say that that was definitely, let's call it a moment where the ball kind of dropped onto the floor and all of us were like picking up the pieces and really trying to tackle what was a very tumultuous rollout that ultimately kind of deflated, right? I think a lot of us really thought it was going to be much bigger than it really is, but I think it was a good and strong indicator on what maybe the next few years are going to look like when it comes to having to be prepared, whether it's as HR leaders or as legal practitioners in this space. I would also like to add like the second highlight, if I had to kind of determine in like this past year, is really seeing how the government has moved in this administration compared to the previous iteration of the Trump administration, right? I think with Trump 1.0, there were a lot of attempts at changes. There were a lot of things that tried to move forward, but there were a lot of quick legal challenges, let's say. But under this administration, what's the dramatic moment? I think they're just a little bit more prepared. They're just moving in a way that was very, very planned. And again, it touches back to that point of HR leaders now have to be even more prepared than ever before to adjust themselves accordingly, whether it's building very resilient programs or having the resources at their fingertips at any moment.
Is there anything in the pipeline headed towards the Supreme Court that you're keeping an eye on now? Is anything standing out for us in the moment?
I think there's still that question of like birthright citizenship, right? Whether or not this directly impacts the people that we engage with the most when it comes to business leaders is a different question. But I think it's going to be a very interesting moment and question of to what extent can the executive branch make these judgment calls, right? There's also a few other things that are going to come up the pipeline, questions related to the 100K proclamation itself. There are going to be lawsuits that will ultimately rise to that level where the Supreme Court will also, again, make that judgment call. To what extent can the administration unilaterally make these decisions? I also think that the other thing that we have to really keep in mind is that this is something that we're going to have to deal with in the next few years. But is that going to flip again when there is going to be another change of administration? So I think the key term that I think about as we kind of close 2025 is resiliency. Like I really, really emphasize to every person I talk to, resilience is everything that we need at the moment.
I'm smiling because resilience, I had to boil down our talent strategy into one word. It's an exercise I like to do, and the business leaders and I ended on resilience. And so echoing that, and birthright citizenship, feel free to amend my layman's definition here for our listeners that may not be familiar, that's anyone that is born in the United States would be a U.S. citizen. Is that a good layman term definition? Anything you'd like to amend there and how that's being challenged?
Yes. So, nothing to amend, but that is an accurate statement. Essentially, what birthright citizenship is that here in the United States, as it stands at the moment, is that when you are born here, you are immediately granted citizenship. That's why it's your birthright. You are allowed to be a U.S. citizen because you are born here in the U.S. And there's, of course, certain permutations of that, being born at a military base and the like. The challenge that is coming up with birthright citizenship is basically whether or not the government can limit it or even adjust it, right? Is it possible that we can look at the Constitution in the way that it is written and reinterpret that to mean something else? Usually, constitutional amendments would require going through Congress and getting a supermajority vote, which is not exactly common, right? When was the last time we had a constitutional amendment? It's been a really, really long time. I think there's so many different ways that we can interpret like the legal challenges, even for me as a legal practitioner, because there's so many state level to federal level kind of conversations about it. Ultimately, I think what the government is going to be looking at and what the Supreme Court is looking at is whether or not the executive branch can actually do these things.
It's an interesting question, and it's taking us all back to civics lessons and civics classes that we had. And I still remember from way back when in business school, one of our law classes it was led by a lawyer, and she had indicated, hey, a lot of this is settled law, so it's not going to be overturned. And I feel like that has not panned out in the way that some people have had. And a good reminder for our listeners that macroeconomic forces and forces in the legal realm directly impact us in very practical ways. So let's talk about 2026 then. And I feel like with so much uncertainty around immigration, that there could be, right or wrong, teams that are concerned or avoid that because it may feel slow or complex or have limited access to great candidates. Some of these may be misinformed views or views that I don't necessarily agree with. But how is your organization cutting through all of that to transform immigration in a way that's seamless for companies in their talent strategies?
For sure. So I think that sometimes what we call traditional practitioners focus a lot on just what we call visa fulfillment, right? I am here because I got an email. Someone needs to be sponsored. Here is my direct response. And they're very prescriptive in just, this is what you need to do. I actually think that what manifest law is doing is a little bit different, which is focusing by taking a step back and talking about corporate strategy as a whole or global mobility strategy, right? So we do combine experienced attorneys with software because it does turn that manual, email driven fire drill into something that's way more structured and trackable across a wide range of stakeholders. But what I will say when I'm talking about this corporate strategy is that we regularly advise HR teams on very clear, what we call playbooks, like standardized workflows, communication, rubrics. How do we make it easier for talent acquisition to target the right individuals so that it's easy to bring them here in the United States? Because a lot of the time, people focus on what we know already. H-1B visas, right? This whole entire lottery process. When there's this massive alphabet soup of other available visas, if you are accurately advised ahead of time on where to look for the right candidates for it. Essentially, we're trying to treat recruiting and the relationship with recruiting and immigration much more carefully by advising upfront to get those flags in place, those funnels in place, so that there's less friction in the whole entire process, right? And that we make it so much easier for companies to deal with foreign national populations. So that's like a big thing that we're really working on is that corporate side of the work. It's not just about the visa fulfillment, it's the strategy in the first place when it comes to finding that talent.
It's such an interesting and intricate process. And what I would say for listeners, as an HR executive, having someone that you could partner with that is proactively discussing these things with you before you get to these cases will really ease this tension in that process. And This is the legal side of immigration. We're talking about very specific part of the business world. And the other piece of it, if I may expand on, is HR leaders also are covering I-9, some of these other traditional processes that seem to be getting more scrutiny from the Trump administration. Are there any other practical pointers on some of these other things that are a bit tied to immigration and work authorization that we should be keeping an eye on?
100%. Actually, this was a recent topic of conversation that I had with some of my corporate clients, which is there's this lack of visibility on the true scale of your foreign national population, right? So existing software focuses a lot on maintaining like a list of people that you've sponsored, right? I sponsored XYZ, so that's why this person is on my list or on my HRIS platform. But there's actually a wider pool of individuals who maybe came in on their own personal visas, their own personal processes, whether it's asylum and now I have an employment document. And the only source of like related truth on knowing that that individual came on some sort of foreign national process is actually their I-9. So why am I even bringing this to kind of light? Is because that's where software or newer software needs to be leveraged, combined with practitioners who can identify the fact that these foreign nationals even exist. So when you're talking about compliance, sometimes people focus or silo themselves to the people that I sponsored, when the reality is that your workforce may have a whole bucket of individuals that you never even knew were foreign nationals that you needed to maintain. So a lot of my active work, especially in 2025, working into 2026, is trying to find ways to flag those individuals ahead of time and add them to your system. This is the year of proactiveness when it comes to compliance. It is not enough to be doing what we have been doing in the last 5 years, last decade, where it's like, oh, they filled in the I-9. That's good enough. Or I only need to focus on this little tiny spreadsheet of individuals that I am sponsoring. You have to be finding who these people are and taking a look at where are they in their immigration journeys and really trying your best to be empathetic and supportive of those individuals so that you can always maintain a good level of compliance.
Yeah, and my understanding is if organizations aren't taking care of this and a team member of theirs is inadvertently not set up correctly in work, that could impact their ability to remain in the United States or to come back into the United States. So this is extremely personal and the stakes are incredibly high. It feels like in a way that it never has been before. I recognize there's a lot of compliance and regulations that have always existed, but it seems like there's a lot more scrutiny being applied in a way that it hasn't before. The other aspect that I wanted to get into, because immigration is such a core part of our country and talent strategies across a wide range of industries, what are some of the innovative ways that you've seen HR leaders are using immigration to solve some of these toughest hiring gaps that are out there and really building truly global teams?
Right. So this is something that I have been diving again very deeply into, especially as we approach 2026, because I think this is a conversation topic in a lot of HR teams. The shortfalls in certain areas of industry, like let's say semiconductor, which I think that is an industry that really feels it the most right now, where it's like, no, we cannot find anyone domestically. We have to bring individuals. A lot of the conversation goes towards diversified strategies, right? It is not enough to focus on the H-1B. I need to start laying down the different talent pipelines or immigration pipelines that make it easier for me to recruit foreign nationals to come to the United States or to bring homegrown talent from abroad to the US. So some of the things that I've been really advising corporate clients and individuals who are leading these HR departments is looking at maybe J1 research scholar visas or establishing new kinds of programs that really can lead towards wonderful H1B or H1B-esque solutions, right? So one key example, if I could share with your audience, is establishing a research component of your organization. It actually doesn't necessarily cost as much. It's true that it could be a planning endeavor, but imagine you're an organization that already does some level of research, right? And yes, it could be proprietary and personal, but you're okay with sharing elements of it with the general public, whether it's for the greater good or for corporate social responsibility obligations and the like. If you have that component and you're comfortable with spinning it off to your own nonprofit, and it's not even about publishing this research in a research journal, but just sharing it with the world, there are ways to use that mechanism to skip the H-1B lottery completely, right? In order to maintain your own workforce as well. Because people who have cap exempt H-1Bs, even if it's for research projects that are only 5 hours a week, right? Or even less than that, can actually file for concurrent H-1Bs with any private employer, so long as you maintain that 5 hour a week role. So it's these creative ideas and these creative solutions that I've been regularly presenting to clients who are really looking for something else in order to attract talent. Because how does that attract talent? You are giving a solution that another company has not been able to provide to them. You are giving them a level of stability and knowing that you are going to be able to create a safety net for this foreign national. Don't rely on the lottery. We have it taken care of. And we're also working with a great law firm or a great series of professionals to put you in the best position for stability in the United States.
This is where process becomes a competitive edge, which is fascinating. And one thing that you mentioned just now is it provides a safety net or a level of comfort to someone that is going potentially through an ambiguous or concerning process when their ability to remain in the country is on the line. And that's where I want to take us here next before we come in for a landing is immigration is a uniquely personal journey that folks go through. My wife, immigrant to this country and now a US citizen, but that was years and years and years of uncertainty and difficult journey to get to where she is today. And so I felt that firsthand. And I'd love to get a sense from you through your customers. What are some of the stories that you're hearing of these personal journeys and how people are feeling at this stage?
I will say that there's like a great mixture of individuals who may see silver linings, let's say. They're still hopeful because at the end of the day, America remains a very strong innovation economy. Where else can you build as a founder your hopes, your dreams, and your like the highest of highs of success, let's say? Whether it's like financial, emotionally, physically, there's so many gamuts of it. But there's also individuals who are very afraid, right? It feels shakier than ever before. What is the government looking for in an immigrant, right? Do they even want me here? Do they not want me here? And I regularly tell individuals who are in that position that I understand their fear, but do not let that fear drive you, right? Do not let that fear kind of change your decision making, right? Because there's actually a lot of resources and information out there. And also what I call reading between the lines of what the government is saying to identify how you can best position yourself to have your own safety net, right? So when you're talking about the journeys of those individuals who are afraid, who are a little bit taken aback by everything that's happening, right? I will say a lot of people are panicked, but when they talk with whether it's like the right practitioner or even their own HR leaders, sometimes HR leaders are the first people to hear about this. I have an employee who's just so scared, emails me every day, what is going on? Am I going to be okay? And all these things. I think teams need to be ready to provide that emotional support of, hey, I'm here for you. I'm here to help you, give you all of the resources that are out there to show you like these insights are going to be able to power you to make sure that I have a stable future and there is something that we can build towards here in the United States, right? Resources are everything, whether it's educational or it's one of being able to call someone who can give answers.
And I remember the weekend, I can't remember the exact date. I'm sure you do. I have this just burnt into your memory when the $100,000 adjustment or proposal came out of the administration. And all of a sudden, I just had one emotional call after another. And the ability to immediately connect our team members with a lawyer that knew what was going on, at least to the extent you could at that point, was so helpful. It just reduced some anxiety. It didn't completely eliminate it, but having that ability is essential, especially as immigration law will continue to evolve in 2026. So there are two more questions, and then we'll come in for that landing I promised here. What is one key thing that you're keeping your eye on in your field for 2026?
Oh, it's definitely how this upcoming lottery season is going to play out. So, let me kind of explain to the listeners here, like, why I'm not even necessarily smiling. I'm kind of like really trying to figure out how this is all going to look like. The government essentially proposed a rule that has already gone through notice and comment period on how they're going to change the lottery process. So, previously, more or less everyone had the same chance of winning unless you had a US master's degree, then you had a slightly higher chance than a lot of others. However, with this proposal, the government is saying we're going to weigh the chances higher for people in higher paying roles. The thought process behind it was that, if you're in a higher paying role, that means you're probably more specialized, you're managerial, you're an executive of some format. And in the current administration's perspective, those are the individuals that we want to have these visas. So the reason why I think this is going to be kind of fascinating on how it's going to play out is, does that mean that suddenly wages are going to skyrocket for foreign nationals and the entire economy as a whole? I have no idea. From a macroeconomic perspective, like, is it enough that the H-1B is going to push in that direction? Or is it that it's going to create a scenario where H-1Bs are completely lost in flavor? Maybe it's actually arguably easier to get because now it's mainly just executives enrolling for this particular lottery, right? Because it's just lost its flavor. I will say that it's also going to determine how HR is going to strategize wage level, wage banding moving forward, right? To attract the best engineers in the world, let's say. They're probably going to start bringing to the conversation, hey, do you know whether or not I'm going to reach a level 3 wage or a level 4 wage so I have a higher chance of winning by the time I enroll in the lottery? I can definitely see every single one of you getting an email at some point with that question. It also leads to potentially higher legal fees. Now, I do think that this is where software can really come in, great products to really compress that costing. But now lawyers have to identify all of those questions before a lottery registration comes in. So as a practitioner in this field, I really am keeping an eye on how this upcoming 2026 season is going to really unfold, because it will speak to our wider economy as a whole, and also how HR leaders are going to be dealing with wages as a concept.
It's going to be a fascinating time. And to close us out here, first, I will remind our listeners that this is all legal commentary and not legal advice on today's podcast. And if you are in the market for an immigration firm, and one that I enjoy working with, Nicole, how would we get a hold of you and your firm?
Yeah, so the best way to reach out to us is actually through our website, which is manifestlaw.com. Many different ways to reach out to us, whether it's through a contact form or through reaching us through our phone number, which is also on the website. Another way that you can reach out to us is via email on help, HELP, at manifestlaw.com. That is another way that you can really quickly get into a consultation or a conversation with our organization. We also have a wide array of social media, so if that's the best way for you to encounter us, we have Instagram, we have TikTok, and the like, so feel free to DM us there.
I'm going to have to look up TikTok. Nicole, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Taylor.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the TroopHR Podcast. If you've liked this episode, we would encourage you to like and subscribe. If you would like to learn more about the TroopHR community, you can reach out to troophr.com. In the meantime, keep living the dream.